My toxic boss tried to get me fired, but ended up destroying her own career instead. The email arrived at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Subject line: immediate action required, performance issues. I stared at my phone screen in the coffee shop parking lot, my hands shaking slightly as I read Rachel Morrison's words. 3 months as my new regional manager, and she was already building a case to fire me. Due to repeated tardiness and failure to meet basic expectations, you are required to attend a disciplinary meeting today at 2 p.m. Bring a representative if you choose. Repeated tardiness? I'd been late exactly once in 4 years, and that was because of a car accident on the highway. Failure to meet expectations? I'd exceeded my sales targets for 18 straight months. But I knew what this was really about. Rachel had made it clear from day one that she didn't like me. Maybe it was because I'd been here longer than her. Maybe it was because other managers respected my work. Or maybe it was because I'd refused to laugh at her inappropriate jokes during team meetings. I sat in my car, watching other employees walk into our building. They had no idea their colleague was about to be executed in a conference room. But Rachel had no idea what I'd been quietly preparing for the last 2 months. The first red flag came during Rachel's second week. I was presenting quarterly results to the leadership team when she cut me off mid-sentence. "Actually, let me stop you there," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice bread. "These numbers don't tell the whole story, do they?" I blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" "Well, anyone can hit targets when they're cherry-picking easy clients." She smiled, but her eyes were cold. "I think we need to look at quality, not just quantity." The room went silent. My numbers weren't just good, they were the best in the region. Everyone knew it, but Rachel was rewriting history in real time. "Of course," I managed to say. "We can discuss that after the meeting." She never brought it up again, but the seed was planted. Other managers started looking at me differently, wondering if maybe my success wasn't as impressive as they'd thought. That night, I went home and did something I'd never done before. I started keeping records, email timestamps, meeting notes, conversation summaries. Call it paranoia, but something told me I was going to need proof of everything. The write-up started small, almost laughably small. First offense, leaving my desk for 10 minutes without notification. Rachel claimed I'd abandoned my post during business hours. Never mind that I was in the bathroom. Second offense, wearing a blue shirt instead of white. Company dress code said professional attire. I'd worn blue shirts for 4 years without comment. But suddenly, it was a serious violation of appearance standards. Third offense, asking a question during a team meeting. Apparently, I was disrupting the flow of communication and showing disrespect for leadership. Each write-up went into my personnel file. Each one moved me closer to termination under company policy. 3 strikes and you're out. My coworkers started avoiding me. Nobody wanted to be associated with someone who was clearly on their way out. I ate lunch alone. I worked alone. I felt like a ghost haunting my own office. But every night I went home and documented everything. Times, dates, witnesses. I photographed every write-up before signing it. I saved every email. Rachel thought she was building a case against me. She had no idea I was building one against her. "We need to talk about your attitude problem," Rachel said, closing her office door behind me. It was a Friday afternoon, and the building was mostly empty. Just me, her, and the security cameras that supposedly recorded everything. Though I'd started to wonder if those cameras actually worked. "I'm not sure what you mean," I replied carefully. The eye rolling, the sighs, the general hostility toward management. She sat behind her desk like a judge preparing to pass sentence. "Multiple team members have complained about your behavior." This was news to me. I'd been walking on eggshells for weeks, afraid to breathe wrong around her. "Could you be more specific? Which team members?" "That's confidential, but the complaints are serious enough that I'm considering immediate termination." My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. "I'd like to request a meeting with HR to discuss these allegations." Rachel's smile was sharp. "Of course, but until then, I'm placing you on probation. Any further incidents will result in immediate dismissal." After she dismissed me, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to calm down. Then I drove straight to the office supplies store and bought a small digital recorder. If she wanted to play games, I was going to change the rules. The recording device was tiny, no bigger than a USB drive. I clipped it inside my jacket pocket every morning, making sure it was always running during interactions with Rachel. At first, I felt guilty about it. But that guilt disappeared when I caught her in her first major lie. During a team meeting, Rachel announced that our department was underperforming. "We're down 15% from last quarter," she said, clicking through slides on her laptop. "Changes need to be made." Except I knew that wasn't true. I'd seen the real numbers. We were actually up 12%. After the meeting, I approached her privately. "I think there might be an error in those figures. My calculations show we're actually ahead of targets." "Your calculations?" she laughed. "Maybe that's part of the problem. You think you know better than management." The recorder in my pocket captured every word. That evening, I pulled the real quarterly reports from our shared database. Screenshot after screenshot of data that contradicted everything Rachel had said. Either she was incompetent or she was lying. I was starting to suspect it was both. The breaking point came on a Wednesday morning. I arrived at work to find my desk cleaned out, my personal items boxed up and sitting by the reception area. "What's going on?" I asked Janet, our receptionist. "Rachel said you were being transferred to a different workspace," Janet whispered, glancing around nervously. "Something about office reorganization. My new workspace was in the basement storage room. No windows, no phone, just a folding table and chair surrounded by boxes of old files and broken equipment. When I found Rachel, she was in the break room, stirring sugar into her coffee like nothing had happened." "I don't understand the desk situation," I said. "Oh, that?" She didn't even look up. "We needed your space for the new intern. Temporary arrangement while we figure out your situation." "What situation?" Now she looked at me, and her smile was pure venom. "Well, we're still deciding whether you're a good fit for this organization. The basement gives you space to think about that." I spent the day in that basement, surrounded by dust and cobwebs, wondering if this was how my career would end. In exile, forgotten by everyone who mattered. But that night, I made a decision. If Rachel wanted to play dirty, I was going to get my hands filthy. The key to beating someone like Rachel was understanding her weaknesses. And after 3 months of careful observation, I'd identified several. First, she was lazy. Half her original presentations were copied from online templates. She regularly missed deadlines and blamed others for her failures. Second, she was careless. She left confidential documents on printers. She had loud phone conversations about sensitive matters. She sent emails to wrong recipients. Third, she was arrogant. She thought everyone was too stupid or scared to challenge her. That third weakness would be her downfall. I started collecting evidence of her incompetence. Screenshots of plagiarized presentations, audio recordings of her admitting she hadn't read important reports, photos of confidential client information left unattended on her desk. But the real treasure came from an unexpected source, Marcus Taylor, our IT administrator. "She keeps asking me to recover deleted emails," he told me during a chance encounter in the parking garage. "Claims she accidentally erased important communications." "Can you do that?" Marcus looked around, then leaned closer. "Technically, yes, but I keep backups of everything for 6 months. Company policy." The wheels in my head started turning. Hypothetically, if someone needed to prove what emails were sent and when. "Hypothetically," Marcus said with a slight smile, "that information exists." The anonymous tip came from someone I never expected. Brenda Walsh, the cleaning lady. Brenda had worked in our building for 12 years. She was invisible to most employees, just another face that showed up after hours to empty trash and vacuum carpets. But Brenda saw everything. "That woman's been going through people's desks," she told me quietly during a late evening when I was still stuck in the basement. "After everyone leaves, she goes through files, takes pictures of things." My blood ran cold. "How long has this been happening?" "Couple months, ever since she started." Brenda glanced around, making sure we were alone. "She also makes a lot of personal calls, real loud ones, about getting people fired." Brenda had been taking out Rachel's trash every night. And Rachel, in her arrogance, had been throwing away handwritten notes about her plans, notes about which employees to target, notes about fabricating reasons for termination. "I saved some things," Brenda said, pulling a manila envelope from her cleaning cart. "Thought someone might need them someday." Inside were photocopies of Rachel's handwritten plans. My name appeared on multiple pages, along with detailed strategies for building a case against me. The smoking gun had literally been thrown in the trash. The disciplinary meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in conference room B. I arrived 5 minutes early, carrying a briefcase that Rachel probably assumed contained my resignation letter. She was wrong. HR Representative Susan Palmer sat at one end of the table, looking uncomfortable. Rachel sat at the other end, a thick folder in front of her, containing what I assumed was my execution paperwork. "Thank you for coming," Susan began. "This meeting is to discuss performance issues and determine next steps." Rachel jumped in immediately. "Susan, I've documented numerous problems with this employee. Tardiness, attitude issues, failure to follow instructions, inappropriate behavior toward management." She started pulling papers from her folder, sliding them across the table. Write-up after write-up, complaint after complaint. It was impressive, in a sick way. "These incidents demonstrate a pattern of unprofessional conduct that cannot continue," Rachel continued. "I'm recommending immediate termination." Susan looked at me expectantly. "Would you like to respond to these allegations?" I opened my briefcase. "Actually, yes, I have some documentation of my own." The color drained from Rachel's face. The first document I placed on the table was a timeline of every interaction I'd had with Rachel since she started. Dates, times, witnesses, and detailed descriptions of each incident. "This shows a pattern of targeted harassment," I said calmly, "beginning on her first day and escalating systematically over 3 months." Susan frowned, studying the timeline. "This is very detailed. I've been documenting everything since I realized I was being targeted." I pulled out the next set of papers. "These are audio recordings of our conversations, including statements where Ms. Morrison admitted to fabricating performance issues." Rachel's mouth opened, then closed. She looked like a fish gasping for air. "You recorded me?" she finally managed. "I recorded our professional interactions to protect myself from false allegations." I turned to Susan. "Which brings me to this." I placed Brenda's photocopies on the table. Rachel's handwritten plans, in her own words, detailing her strategy to eliminate problem employees and establish management authority through fear. Susan's face went pale as she read Rachel's notes. "Where did you get these?" "They were discarded in the trash. A concerned employee retrieved them." I looked directly at Rachel. "Did you write these plans?" She stared at the papers like they were poisonous snakes. Those were brainstorming notes, not actual plans." "Brainstorming notes about fabricating reasons to fire employees?" The room went dead silent, but I wasn't finished, not even close. "Susan, I also need to address the falsified performance data that Ms. Morrison has been presenting to leadership." I pulled out printed screenshots of our actual quarterly numbers alongside Rachel's fabricated reports. "She's been telling the executive team that our department is failing when we're actually exceeding targets by 12%. Either she's incompetent at basic math, or she's deliberately lying to make the department look bad." Rachel finally found her voice. "Those numbers are interpreted differently depending on the metrics used." "Really?" I placed another document on the table. "Because here's an email from you to the regional director claiming I personally cost the company $50,000 in lost sales. But our CRM system shows I actually generated $78,000 in new revenue that same quarter." Susan was taking notes furiously now. "Ms. Morrison, can you explain this discrepancy? There must be some mistake in the data." "The data is timestamped and backed up on company servers," I said. "Marcus Chen in IT can verify everything." I watched Rachel's face cycle through emotions. Anger, fear, panic, and finally, defeat. She was realizing that her house of cards was collapsing, but I still had one more bomb to drop. "There's something else," I said, reaching into my briefcase one final time. "Ms. Morrison has been conducting unauthorized surveillance of employees." I placed photos on the table, showing Rachel going through desks after hours. Brenda had taken them with her phone over several weeks, building an undeniable pattern. "She's been searching through personal files, taking pictures of confidential information, and violating employee privacy. This is documented corporate espionage." Susan looked like she might be sick. "Ms. Morrison, is this true?" Rachel's composure finally cracked completely. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. These employees were undermining my authority by searching through their personal belongings without consent. "It's not illegal if it's company property." "Actually," I said quietly, "it is illegal. Unauthorized access to employee files violates federal privacy laws." The photos show you accessing information you had no business reviewing. The meeting room felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Susan was scribbling notes so fast her pen was smoking. Rachel was sweating through her expensive blazer. "I think," Susan said carefully, "we need to suspend this meeting while I consult with legal and upper management." Rachel stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're taking the word of a disgruntled employee over management." "Ma'am," Susan replied, "I'm taking the word of documented evidence over hearsay." Game over. The next morning, I arrived at work to find my desk back in its original location. My personal items had been returned, and there was even a small plant that someone had added as a peace offering. Rachel's office door was closed, and it stayed that way all morning. Around lunchtime, I saw Susan Palmer escorting 2 people in expensive suits toward the executive wing. Corporate investigators, I assumed. The kind of people who got called in when things went seriously wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Chen. "Emergency server backup requested for Morrison email account. Lawyers involved." Then another text from Brenda. "Security cameras being reviewed for past 3 months. Big meeting in executive conference room." The building felt different that day. People whispered in corners. Managers looked stressed. Even employees who weren't involved in the drama could sense something major was happening. At 3 p.m., an email went out to all staff. "Due to ongoing personnel matters, Regional Manager Rachel Morrison will be unavailable until further notice. All questions should be directed to Susan Palmer in HR." I read that email 3 times, hardly believing it was real. After months of feeling powerless, watching her destroy people's careers and morale, justice was finally coming. But the best part? It was her own actions that had doomed her. The investigation moved faster than I expected. By Thursday, corporate security was boxing up Rachel's office. By Friday, IT was wiping her computer and phone access. The official announcement came the following Monday. "Rachel Morrison is no longer employed with our organization. We are committed to maintaining a professional and respectful workplace for all employees." No details, no explanations, just the corporate equivalent of "she's gone." But the real story came out in pieces over the following weeks. Turns out, my case wasn't isolated. The investigators had found evidence of similar patterns with other employees: false performance reviews, fabricated complaints, unauthorized surveillance. Rachel had been running a systematic campaign of harassment against anyone she viewed as a threat. Worse, they discovered she'd been stealing, taking credit for other people's work, inflating her own performance numbers, and even submitting fake expense reports for personal purchases. The plagiarized presentations I'd noticed? Corporate found dozens of them. She'd been copying material from competitors and presenting it as her own strategic insights. Marcus Chen told me the email backups revealed the full scope of her deception. Messages to upper management claiming credit for successes that weren't hers. Communications with other managers trying to coordinate attacks on specific employees. It was breathtaking in its scope and stupidity. 2 weeks after Rachel's departure, Susan Palmer called me into her office. But this time, it wasn't for discipline. "I owe you an apology," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. "The company failed you badly. We should have caught this sooner. I understand you were working with limited information." "No, that's not an excuse." Susan pulled out a thick folder. The investigation revealed that we had red flags about Ms. Morrison from her previous employer. We ignored them during hiring because she had connections in upper management. She slid the folder across her desk. "These are the references we should have checked more carefully. Complaints about harassment, ethical violations, even a lawsuit that was settled out of court." I flipped through the papers, amazed at what I was seeing. Rachel's entire career was built on manipulation, fraud, and leaving destroyed workplaces in her wake. How did she keep getting promoted? "She was very good at managing up," Susan said. "She knew how to impress the right people while terrorizing everyone below her. It's a classic pattern." Susan leaned forward. "But here's what I want you to know. Your documentation, your evidence, your courage to fight back. It didn't just save your job, it saved this entire department." "What do you mean?" "She was planning to fire 7 more people over the next 6 months. We found the list. The list was horrifying. 7 names, 7 strategies, 7 detailed plans for destruction. Marcus Chen was on it for asking too many questions about system security. Brenda Walsh was on it for insubordination and possible theft. completely fabricated charges that would have destroyed a woman who'd worked loyally for 12 years. Sarah Kim from accounting was targeted for questioning budget allocations. Translation: she'd noticed discrepancies in Rachel's expense reports. Even Janet, our sweet receptionist, was marked for elimination because she was too friendly with problem employees, meaning she'd been kind to people Rachel was targeting. Reading those plans made me sick. Each name represented a family, a livelihood, a person whose life would have been shattered for no reason other than Rachel's paranoid need for control. The scary part, Susan told me, is that it probably would have worked. She was very good at building false cases. If you hadn't fought back with evidence, she might have eliminated half the department before anyone caught on. That night, I called Marcus, Brenda, and the others on the list. I told them what I'd discovered, how close they'd come to disaster without even knowing it. "You saved my job," Brenda said, crying over the phone. "You saved all of us." But I knew the truth. They'd saved themselves by being brave enough to help me when it mattered. The ripple effects continued for months. Corporate launched a company-wide review of management practices. New policies were implemented requiring multiple approvals for disciplinary actions. Anonymous reporting systems were established. Most importantly, they brought in workplace harassment training for all managers. The kind of training that might have prevented someone like Rachel from gaining power in the first place. My coworkers started talking to me again. The fear that had permeated our department gradually lifted. People smiled in meetings. They shared ideas without worrying about retaliation. Janet put up a new plant in the lobby with a small sign, "Growth happens when fear dies." But the biggest change was in how we all viewed workplace harassment. People who'd suffered in silence for years started speaking up. The anonymous reporting system received dozens of complaints about various managers across different departments. Rachel's downfall had created a culture shift. Employees realized they had power when they worked together and documented everything. 3 months later, I got promoted to senior account manager, a position that had been mysteriously unavailable during Rachel's reign. My new office had windows, a view of the city, and best of all, a door I could close whenever I needed to think. The promotion came with a substantial raise and, ironically, put me at the same management level Rachel had held. The legal aftermath was swift and decisive. Rachel tried to sue the company for wrongful termination, claiming she was the victim of a coordinated employee conspiracy. That lawsuit lasted exactly 3 weeks. Our legal team presented her own handwritten plans, the audio recordings, the documentation of her fraud and harassment. Her lawyers withdrew from the case, and Rachel was left facing potential criminal charges for corporate espionage and theft. She eventually accepted a settlement that required her to pay back stolen funds and agree to never work in management again. The non-disclosure agreement worked both ways. She couldn't talk about the company and they wouldn't press criminal charges. But word spread in our industry anyway. Rachel's name became toxic. Former colleagues warned their networks. Her LinkedIn profile went dark. She simply vanished from the professional world she'd tried so hard to dominate. Meanwhile, I was invited to speak at a regional conference about workplace harassment prevention. Standing at that podium, looking out at hundreds of professionals, I shared the most important lesson I'd learned. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And remember that bullies count on your silence. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. 6 months after Rachel's departure, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from Jennifer Walsh, a woman I'd never met who worked at Rachel's previous company. "I saw your name in a news article about workplace harassment," Jennifer said. "I wanted to thank you for what you did. I'm not sure I understand. Rachel Morrison destroyed my career 3 years ago. False allegations, fabricated performance reviews, the whole playbook. I tried to fight back, but I didn't have the evidence you had. I lost my job, my reputation, everything." Jennifer's voice shook as she continued. "When your story broke, it validated everything I'd been saying for years. Corporate finally reopened my case. They found evidence of Rachel's pattern of behavior and offered me a settlement." She wasn't the only one. Over the following months, I heard from 7 other people whose careers had been damaged by Rachel at different companies. My documentation had created a paper trail that stretched back almost a decade. Each person had tried to fight back individually and failed. But together, Their stories painted a picture of systematic abuse that no company could ignore. "You gave us our voices back," Jennifer told me during our second conversation. "You proved it was possible to beat someone like her." The network we formed became a support system for other harassment victims. We shared strategies, resources, and most importantly, hope. A year later, I was settling into my new role as regional manager, Rachel's old position, which had been restructured and expanded after the investigation. The promotion came with a choice. I could relocate to a bigger market with more opportunities, or stay and rebuild the department that Rachel had nearly destroyed. I chose to stay. My first day as a manager, I gathered the entire team in the conference room where Rachel had tried to fire me. "I know some of you lived through difficult times recently," I began. "I want you to know that those days are over. This department will be built on respect, honesty, and shared success." I established an open-door policy. I created anonymous feedback systems. I made sure every employee had clear, documented expectations and regular, honest performance reviews. Most importantly, I hired Marcus Chen as my assistant manager. His technical skills and integrity made him perfect for the role, and I trusted him completely. Brenda Walsh got a promotion too, to head of facilities management, a new position that recognized her years of loyal service and keen observations. Within 6 months, our department's productivity increased by 30%. Turnover dropped to nearly zero. Employee satisfaction scores reached company-wide highs. The best revenge against Rachel's legacy wasn't punishment. It was proving that leadership built on respect and honesty worked better than fear and manipulation. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning, 2 years after Rachel's departure. It was from a reporter at the Business Journal who was writing an investigative piece about workplace harassment in corporate America. "Your case has become something of a landmark," she told me. "Legal experts are calling it a textbook example of how employees can successfully fight back against abusive managers." The article, when it came out, was featured on the magazine's cover. The paper trail that brought down a bully included interviews with employment lawyers, HR professionals, and other harassment survivors. But what surprised me most was the final paragraph. "Morrison's case highlights the importance of documentation and collective action in combating workplace abuse. Sources confirm that Morrison has struggled to find employment since her termination, with multiple companies declining to hire her after reference checks revealed her history of harassment." Rachel's career was truly over, not because of some dramatic confrontation or public shaming, but because the truth had finally caught up with her. 3 months after the article, I received a LinkedIn message from someone named David Chen, no relation to Marcus. "I was about to hire Rachel Morrison as a consultant when I saw your story. Thank you for saving me from making a terrible mistake." The message was followed by dozens of others from managers and HR professionals who'd used my documentation methods to protect their own employees from similar predators. My story had become a template for fighting back. The speaking engagements started small, local business groups and professional associations, but word spread quickly about the manager who documented her way to justice. Soon I was traveling to conferences across the country, sharing my story and teaching others how to protect themselves from workplace harassment. The most powerful moment came during a presentation in Chicago. A young woman in the front row raised her hand during the Q&A session. "I'm dealing with something similar right now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My boss is trying to force me out, but I don't have any proof." "What's your name?" I asked. "Sarah." "Sarah, let me ask you something. Do you have access to email? A phone that can record? A notebook where you can write things down?" She nodded. "Then you have everything you need to protect yourself. Start today. Document everything. And remember, you're not alone in this fight." After the presentation, Sarah approached me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for giving me hope." 6 months later, she sent me an email with the subject line, "Victory." Her toxic manager had been terminated after Sarah used my documentation methods to expose a pattern of harassment affecting multiple employees. The ripple effect continued spreading. 5 years after the Rachel Morrison incident, I was invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee on workplace harassment. The hearing room was packed with reporters, advocates, and other survivors. "Ms. Patterson," the committee chair began, Your case has been cited in numerous legal briefs and policy discussions. What would you tell other employees who are facing similar situations? I looked out at the gallery, seeing faces that reminded me of my younger self, scared, isolated, convinced they were powerless. I would tell them that documentation is power, I said. That truth has a way of surfacing when you're patient and persistent, and that standing up to a bully isn't just about saving yourself, it's about protecting everyone who comes after you. The questioning continued for 2 hours. Senators asked about policy recommendations, legal reforms, and corporate accountability measures. But the moment that stuck with me came during a break when a young staffer approached me in the hallway. "My mom worked for someone like Rachel," she said quietly. "She never fought back because she was afraid. But watching you gives me hope that things can change." That conversation reminded me why I'd started speaking publicly in the first place. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about making sure no one else had to face what I'd faced alone. Last month, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping and a handwritten note. The clipping was from a small-town paper. Local business owner accused of employee harassment. The accompanying article described allegations that sounded remarkably familiar. False accusations, fabricated performance issues, systematic intimidation. The accused business owner's name was Rachel Morrison. The handwritten note was brief. She tried to start over in a small town where nobody knew her history. But one of her employees had read your story and knew what to look for. "Thank you for teaching us how to fight back. A grateful survivor." I sat in my office, holding that newspaper clipping, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. From a basement storage room to a corner office. From victim to advocate. From silence to speaking truth to power. Rachel had tried to destroy my career and nearly succeeded. But in fighting back, I discovered strength I never knew I had. More importantly, I'd learned that one person with courage and documentation could change everything. The photo on my desk showed our department team at last year's company picnic. 43 people smiling in the sunshine, working for an organization that valued respect and integrity. None of them would ever know how close they'd come to working under someone like Rachel Morrison. And they'd never have to, as long as people like us kept sharing our stories. Today marks exactly 6 years since Rachel Morrison walked into our building with her clicking heels and fake smile. I'm sitting in the same conference room where she tried to fire me, preparing for our monthly team meeting. The agenda includes celebrating promotions for 3 team members, reviewing our industry-leading retention rates, and discussing our expansion into 2 new markets. We've become the most successful region in the company, but the real victory isn't in the numbers or the profits. It's in the culture we've built, one where people feel safe to speak up, to disagree respectfully, to grow without fear. Marcus Chen recently accepted a promotion to Director of Operations. Brenda Walsh was featured in the company newsletter for her innovative facilities management program. Janet, our receptionist, started college last fall using the company's tuition assistance program. Everyone Rachel tried to destroy has thrived. As for Rachel herself, the small-town newspaper incident was apparently her final attempt at management. According to my sources in the industry, she now works in retail sales under a different name, far from any position of power over other people's careers. Her reign of terror lasted 3 months. Our culture of respect and accountability has lasted 6 years and counting. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not just finding another job when things got difficult, if fighting back was worth the stress and uncertainty. The answer comes easily. Absolutely. Because somewhere out there, another Rachel Morrison is walking into another office building, clicking her heels and planning her next campaign of harassment. And somewhere else, another employee is learning to document everything, building their case and preparing to fight back. The cycle continues. But now it includes people who know that bullies can be beaten. And that makes all the difference. My toxic boss tried to get me fired, but ended up destroying her own career instead.